Sometimes heroes don't wear capes. Sometimes they wear leather jackets, ride loud motorcycles, and come from the most unexpected places. And on one ordinary afternoon in a small town diner, a biker gang leader proved exactly that. For generations, society has relied on a familiar set of assumptions to quickly categorize people. What someone wears, how they speak, what music they listen to, the tattoos on their skin, or the company they keep. These surface-level impressions become filters through which we interpret their character. A biker gang, for example, often triggers a single, predictable image in the minds of many: loud engines, leather jackets, risky behavior, and an aura of rebellion. To some, bikers represent chaos and trouble, people who operate outside the rules and bring danger wherever they go. But this story challenges that assumption at its core and reminds us that stereotypes, no matter how common, are often deeply misleading. When the biker gang leader walked into the small town diner, the room shifted. Conversations softened, the regular customers straightened in their seats, and a few uneasy glances were exchanged. His presence, commanding, bold, unmistakable, was enough to make people brace themselves for the worst. The weight of his reputation, or at least the reputation people imagined he carried, entered that diner long before he took his first step inside. Yet what no one expected was that this man would become the quiet, steady hero of the hour. The breaking of stereotypes began not with action, but with awareness. While many people saw only a biker and assumed recklessness or intimidation, he noticed something far more important: the bruises on the waitress's arm. He saw what others had overlooked, not because they were blind, but because they weren't looking for it. Stereotypes create a mental shortcut. Patrons expected a biker to be a threat, but they never considered that the real threat might come from someone who looked perfectly ordinary, someone who blended into the background. In this way, stereotypes don't just misrepresent people, they distort our perception of reality. The biker gang leader's awareness demonstrated something profound. Empathy is not restricted to those who look safe or gentle. Compassion doesn't come with a dress code. His instinct to observe the quiet signals of distress shattered the illusion that only certain types of people have the capacity for kindness. In truth, empathy arises from lived experiences, from understanding hardship, and from recognizing pain in others because you've known it in some form yourself. The people in the diner had been conditioned to assume that if trouble came through the door, it would come wearing a vest adorned with patches and riding boots that hit the floor with force. But trouble had already been sitting among them, polite, clean, cut, and unsuspecting. The biker's ability to see beneath the surface served as the first crack in the wall of stereotypes. That wall began to crumble further when he chose to act. When he stood up, people held their breath. They braced for conflict, expecting anger or violence. But the biker didn't raise his voice or throw a punch. He didn't embody the stereotype people had feared. Instead, he acted with calm clarity, positioning himself as a protector rather than an aggressor. He confronted the situation not as someone seeking dominance, but as someone seeking justice. This distinction matters because it highlights the contrast between assumption and intention. Stereotypes simplify people into exaggerated roles, but the biker's actions reminded everyone in that diner that real character reveals itself only through behavior, not appearance. This moment also exposed another bias. Society tends to romanticize certain heroes while dismissing others. A firefighter, a police officer, or a doctor stepping in to help someone in danger fits the narrative we're used to. But a biker, a gang leader, those images don't align with the traditional hero archetype. And that's precisely why his actions carried such weight. When someone we expect to fear becomes the person we rely on, it forces us to question the foundations of our assumptions. It forces us to reconsider who we label as dangerous and who we label as trustworthy. The waitress, who likely had her own assumptions when she served his table, also witnessed the power of this stereotype being broken. To her, he was not just a leather-clad customer. He became the first person to truly see her suffering and respond to it. His presence, once alarming, became a source of unexpected safety, And in that moment, her perception of him, and perhaps of people like him, shifted entirely. She saw not the tattoos or the rough exterior, but the humanity behind it. The town felt this shift too. Word travels fast in small places, and the story spread not only because of what he did, but because of who he was. People were stunned because it challenged what they thought they knew. It highlighted a truth they had ignored, that kindness often comes from unexpected places, and goodness can live in the hearts of those society is quick to judge. Stereotypes crumble when confronted with undeniable evidence. They collapse when someone, through their actions, proves them false. The biker gang leader didn't set out to change anyone's perception. He simply did what he believed was right. But in doing so, he dismantled a long-standing assumption that appearance can tell you everything about a person. His story serves as a reminder that sometimes the people we fear the most are the ones willing to stand up when no one else will. In a world overflowing with noise, distraction, and constant motion, the most heroic acts often begin with something incredibly simple: noticing. Observation may seem passive, but it is one of the most powerful tools we possess. It can expose hidden suffering, prevent danger, and open the door to compassion. Yet, many people move through life without really seeing what is right in front of them. That is what makes this moment in the diner so striking. The biker gang leader saw what everyone else had overlooked. The waitress had been moving between tables with the same mechanical routine she had perfected over months. A polite smile here, a refilled coffee cup there. She knew how to hide her pain, how to keep her sleeves tugged down just enough, how to turn her arm a certain way so the bruises didn't show too clearly. Most customers never looked up from their plates long enough to notice. Even if they had, many wouldn't have looked close enough to recognize what those faint shadows on her skin really meant. People see what they expect to see, and they expect to see a tired waitress, not a silent cry for help. But he noticed. The biker leader, a man who had probably seen enough hardship in his life to recognize the signs of someone suffering, caught the subtle details. The way she winced slightly when she reached for a glass. The way she kept adjusting her sleeve as though trying to hide something. The faint tremble in her hands. And then, when the fabric slipped just a little too far, he saw the bruise. Not a simple bruise from bumping into a counter. Bruises have stories, and this one told a story of force, fear, and repeated harm. Observation is not just about eyesight, it is about awareness. It is about noticing patterns, emotions, behaviors, things most people overlook because they are too busy or too uncomfortable to confront what those signs might mean. Many people fear getting involved. They fear misinterpreting the situation. They fear the responsibility that comes with seeing the truth. And so, unintentionally, they train themselves not to look too closely. But the biker leader had the courage to look. It wasn't that he had any special role or responsibility in this diner. He wasn't in a position of authority. He wasn't the waitress's friend or family member. He was just a customer passing through. Yet his perspective, sharp, unfiltered, and unburdened by small-town routines, allowed him to see what the townspeople had grown numb to. The power of observation lies in its ripple effect. When one person truly sees, it can change the course of an entire situation. His noticing didn't remain silent. It sparked thoughts, decisions, and eventually action. But before the action came the moment of awareness, the split second when his instinct told him that something was very wrong. That awareness is what separates bystanders from protectors. Another important truth becomes clear here. Suffering often hides in plain sight. Abusers depend on silence. They rely on the victim's fear, the neighbor's indifference, and the community's unwillingness to dig deeper. When no one pays attention, the cycle continues undisturbed. But all it takes is one observant person to break that silence. One person to say, "I see you, and I'm not looking away." The biker leader's observation also highlights the importance of emotional intelligence. For someone with a rough appearance and a reputation that intimidated strangers, he demonstrated a sensitivity many would not expect. He wasn't just scanning the room for threats. He was reading the emotions and tensions woven into the space. People who have endured or witnessed hardship often develop a heightened ability to sense distress in others. They know what fear looks like, even when it is masked behind a smile. This quality is something society often undervalues. We praise bold action, heroic rescues, dramatic moments. But none of those things happen without the quiet, crucial first step, seeing what others do not. His observation also exposed how easily communities can overlook the suffering within them. The townspeople were used to the waitress. They saw her every day. Familiarity can dull our perception. When someone's pain becomes routine, people stop recognizing it as pain. But to an outsider, nothing was routine. The biker leader saw the town with fresh eyes. And because he wasn't weighed down by assumptions or social blinders, he noticed the signals that had become invisible to everyone else. The power of observation is not limited to noticing bruises. It is about noticing people, their emotions, their changes, their silent struggles. It is about being present enough in a moment to understand when something is wrong. When he observed the waitress, he wasn't simply looking at her. He was seeing her humanity. And seeing someone's humanity is often the first act of kindness. This moment reminds us that observing someone's pain is not intrusive. It is compassionate. Looking away may feel respectful, but sometimes it is simply a comfortable form of neglect. By choosing to see, the biker leader demonstrated empathy stronger than words. He didn't need to ask her why she was hurt. His attention alone communicated that he cared. His observation pulled back the curtain on a truth everyone else had missed. And in doing so, he showed that the world doesn't change only through grand gestures or heroic leaps, but through quiet, intentional awareness, the kind that starts with truly seeing the people around us. Courage is often imagined as something loud, explosive, or dramatic, running into a burning building, charging toward danger, or making grand gestures in moments of crisis. But real courage, the kind that changes lives and alters the course of a story, is sometimes much quieter. It appears in situations where fear whispers, "Stay out of it," and yet someone steps forward anyway. That is the kind of courage the biker gang leader showed the moment he decided not only to notice the waitress's bruises, but to act on what he had seen. Most people underestimate how difficult it is to intervene. When faced with a situation that feels tense, uncertain, or morally complicated, many freeze. They question themselves, doubt their instincts, or convince themselves that someone else will handle it. There is a fear of being wrong, a fear of making the situation worse, and above all, a fear of getting involved in something that doesn't directly concern them. These fears are powerful enough to silence the majority of witnesses in any troubling situation. But courage is the willingness to push through that fear, not because you're fearless, but because you know someone else has even more to fear than you do. When the biker leader chose to act, he broke through a barrier many never cross. He was in a small town diner where he knew his presence already made people tense. He understood that standing up, walking across the room, and engaging himself in what seemed like someone else's problem could be misinterpreted, resisted, or even escalated. He knew that stepping in might paint him as the aggressor or troublemaker. After all, that was the stereotype people already had of him. Yet he didn't let any of that stop him. The courage he showed wasn't impulsive. It was deliberate. He watched the situation closely, assessed the dynamic, and came to one conclusion: the waitress needed help, and no one else was prepared to offer it. Courage, in its truest form, is the ability to act even when you might pay a personal price for it. For him, that price could have been confrontation, conflict, or even legal complication, but protecting someone in danger outweighed every personal risk. What makes his courage even more meaningful is that he acted without knowing how his intervention would be received. The waitress herself might have denied needing help. The man causing her harm might have reacted violently. The onlookers might have blamed him for stirring up trouble. Yet he accepted all these unknowns and still moved forward. This willingness to shoulder uncertainty is a defining element of moral courage. As he stood up, the entire diner felt the shift. People who had been silently watching the situation unfold through the corners of their eyes suddenly became alert. The quiet clink of dishes stopped. Even without raising his voice, his actions created a ripple of awareness. And in that charged atmosphere, his intentions became clear. He wasn't rising in anger, he was rising in defense. Often, courage is shown not in how loudly someone speaks, but in the way they carry themselves in a moment of decision. The biker didn't storm across the room or provoke a confrontation. He stepped forward with a calm, firm presence, a presence that communicated both strength and restraint. His courage was grounded, not reckless. It came from a place of care, not ego. Another layer of courage appeared in the choices he made after standing up. Acting courageously doesn't end with the first step. It requires the resolve to continue doing what is right, even when the situation becomes uncomfortable or complicated. He approached the waitress with gentleness, checking on her well-being. He confronted the source of her bruises with firmness, but without escalating the situation into violence. He made it clear that what was happening would not go unnoticed, not anymore. This moment challenges a common misconception, that courage belongs only to those with authority, power, or training. The truth is that courage belongs to ordinary people who choose to act when others choose to stay silent. He had no badge, no official role, and no obligation, yet he demonstrated a level of bravery that many in positions of authority struggle to show. It also reveals that courage often comes from empathy. People who have experienced hardship or have lived in environments where danger is real sometimes understand, more intimately, what fear looks like. They recognize the signs of suffering because they've felt something similar themselves. This lived understanding can fuel a deeper sense of responsibility to protect others. The biker leader didn't act out of impulse. He acted out of recognition. He saw himself in that moment, or someone he once knew, and refused to let the cycle of harm continue in front of him. Moreover, courage is contagious. His willingness to step forward created a shift in the atmosphere of the diner. People who had been too afraid or too unsure to intervene suddenly saw a path. His courage gave others permission to care, to stand up, to question what they had previously ignored. In moments like these, one person's bravery becomes a catalyst for collective awareness. The waitress, who had spent so long feeling invisible, suddenly realized that someone not only saw her pain but cared enough to do something about it. That alone can be life-changing. Courage has the power to restore hope, dignity, and strength to someone who has been stripped of it. And it all begins with one person deciding, "I will not stay silent." The biker leader's decision to act was not heroic because of strength or intimidation. It was heroic because he used his courage to protect someone who couldn't openly protect herself. His bravery wasn't loud, but it was powerful. It showed that courage isn't reserved for perfect heroes. It is accessible to anyone who is willing to stand up when it matters most. When people imagine a biker gang leader stepping into a tense situation, they often picture the scene turning chaotic, voices raised, fists clenched, and anger exploding like a match dropped in gasoline. That stereotype makes his choice even more powerful. Because in this story, the true strength he displayed was not in overpowering anyone, but in refusing to let the situation spiral into violence. Instead, he chose protection through calm authority, emotional intelligence, and unwavering presence. This form of strength is quieter, but far more impactful. Violence is the simplest reaction when emotions run high. Anger is easy, rage is instinctive, especially for someone with a rough background someone who has likely faced confrontations before, the natural expectation might be that he would immediately resort to intimidation or physical force. But he didn't. That deliberate restraint shows a depth of character that many people never expected to find in him. When he saw the bruises on the waitress's arm, something shifted inside him. There was no doubt that he felt anger any compassionate person would. But he understood an important truth. When someone is already hurt, the last thing they need is more chaos. They need protection, stability, and control over a situation that has long taken control away from them. Violence, even when used with good intentions, can create more fear rather than relief. He didn't want her to witness another explosion of force. He wanted her to feel safe. So instead of acting impulsively, he approached the situation with a calm, collected presence. Calmness can be more intimidating than aggression. It signals confidence, certainty, and deliberation. When he stood up and walked toward her, he didn't move like a man ready for a fight. He moved like someone with a purpose. His steps were firm, not rushed. His expression was serious, not enraged. His focus was solely on her, not on the man who had caused her pain. His first instinct was to check on the waitress, not confront the abuser. That choice alone reveals his priorities. Before anything else, he needed to know if she was okay. He needed to ensure she understood that someone was finally in her corner. By speaking gently, asking if she needed help, or simply meeting her eyes with understanding, he gave her something she hadn't felt in a long time: security. This initial act of care set the tone for everything that followed. When he eventually addressed the source of the bruises, he did so without shouting or escalating. He used a controlled tone, one that carried authority without aggression. This is a skill most people never master, especially people who have lived in environments where conflict often turns physical. But he showed discipline, emotional maturity, and a deep understanding of what the moment required. Violence might have satisfied his anger, but it wouldn't have protected her. True protection requires thinking beyond impulse. Moreover, choosing a nonviolent approach made it easier for the waitress to accept help. Victims of abuse often fear the fallout of confrontation. They worry the situation will get worse. They fear revenge, public embarrassment, or being blamed. If he had reacted violently, she might have felt even more trapped, responsible for causing a scene, or terrified that things would escalate after he left. But by staying calm, he created an environment where she could step forward without fear of more harm. This kind of strength challenges the cultural idea that real men prove themselves through dominance or force. The biker leader proved that real strength lies in control, not in controlling others, but in controlling oneself. He showed that masculinity, when healthy, is not measured by how loudly you roar, but by how effectively you protect. Another powerful element of his nonviolent approach was how it influenced everyone watching. The entire diner had paused, holding its breath. Many of them probably expected the situation to explode. But when he handled it with composure, the tension eased. People felt safer. Some even felt empowered. His behavior set a model for how intervention should look. Not reckless, but responsible. Not driven by ego, but by empathy. Protection without violence also reflects a deep respect for boundaries and consequences. The biker leader's actions weren't about proving a point or displaying dominance. They were about making sure the waitress knew that someone saw her, believed her, and valued her safety. He did not try to be a savior through force. He tried to be an ally through presence. This restraint also showed an understanding of the law, of accountability, and of long-term safety. Violence might have temporarily neutralized the immediate threat, but it could have created new ones: legal trouble, retaliation, or further emotional trauma for the victim. Instead, the biker leader responded strategically, contacting authorities, involving bystanders, or simply placing himself between her and the abuser. These actions created real, lasting protection. This moment reveals something crucial. Protection is not about throwing punches. It's about creating conditions where harm can no longer reach someone. The biker leader did not need to intimidate physically. His calm confidence did that on its own. His presence alone was enough to disrupt the abuser's control and shift the power dynamic entirely. And perhaps the most significant part of his nonviolent protection was what it communicated to the waitress. For the first time in a long time, someone stood up for her without creating new danger. Someone helped her without making her feel small, powerless, or terrified. Someone showed her that strength can be gentle. That safety doesn't always arrive in a blaze of noise. That sometimes the most protective person in the room is the one who chooses not to fight. By choosing restraint over rage, he redefined what it means to be strong, and what it truly means to protect. Communities are built on stories, shared experiences, whispered conversations, and the lessons people learn from watching one another. In small towns especially, news doesn't just travel. It spreads like wildfire, shaping opinions, altering relationships, and revealing truths people never noticed before. What the biker gang leader did in that diner didn't stay within those four walls. It sent a shockwave through the entire town, challenging long-held beliefs, exposing hidden problems, and inspiring conversations that had been silent for far too long. The diner had always been a comfortable place, a familiar gathering spot where people came to unwind, share gossip, and observe the slow rhythm of small town life. But when the biker leader intervened, that comfort was shaken. People who had been sitting just a few tables away realized they had overlooked signs of suffering right in front of them. They had seen the waitress every day, smiled at her, made small talk, and yet failed to notice the bruises, the fear, or the exhaustion hiding behind her forced smile. When one person acts with courage, it forces everyone else to confront their own inaction. This was the first part of the community impact, awareness. Suddenly, people began to reflect on what they had missed. They wondered how long it had been happening. They questioned whether there had been other signs, other moments when she'd seemed nervous or withdrawn. And perhaps most painfully, they asked themselves why it took an outsider, someone with no history in the town, someone they initially felt wary of, to recognize what they should have seen long ago. Awareness quickly shifted into conversation. Small towns thrive on talk, but this time the talk had weight. The story spread through coffee shops, local shops, barber shops, church gatherings, and school parking lots. Everywhere people gathered, the subject came up. Did you hear what happened at the diner? Some shared the story with admiration, others with surprise, and some with shame that they hadn't been the ones to help. This leads to the second impact, breaking silence. Domestic abuse, emotional trauma, and hidden suffering are topics often buried under politeness in small communities. People prefer to look away rather than confront ugliness. But the bikers' intervention made the topic unavoidable. For the first time in a long time, people began openly discussing the issue. Women who had quietly endured their own struggles felt seen. Men who had ignored signs among friends or neighbors felt compelled to reflect. The town began to confront the harsh reality that abuse can hide behind any door, even the doors they thought they knew well. His actions also influenced how the community viewed bravery. Many people had believed that courage belonged to certain types of individuals: police officers, firefighters, pastors, community leaders. Yet courage had come from someone they had judged based on his appearance and reputation. This realization sparked the third impact, redefining heroism. People began questioning their assumptions about who can be trusted, who can protect, and who can lead. The biker gang leader, once regarded with suspicion, became a symbol of unexpected integrity. His actions reminded the community that character has nothing to do with clothing, lifestyle, or social labels. It's defined by choices. Then came the fourth impact, inspiration. Stories of bravery are contagious. Parents told the story to their children as an example of standing up for others. Teachers mentioned it in classrooms when discussing empathy or responsibility. Young people began to see that courage doesn't require power or authority. It simply requires a heart willing to act. Even adults who had witnessed injustices in their own workplaces, marriages, or neighborhoods felt a stir of resolve. If someone like him could step forward, maybe they could too. Another important community shift was the fifth impact, strengthening connections. The waitress, who once felt invisible, suddenly became the center of care and concern. People offered help, support, and resources. Some community members reached out quietly, sharing their own experiences or offering a listening ear. Others began checking on their neighbors more intentionally. The diner staff became closer, more protective of one another. Even the customers became more observant and empathetic. In a way, the biker leader's single moment of intervention created a ripple of compassion that touched every corner of the town. Perhaps one of the most surprising results was the sixth impact, changing perceptions of the biker community. Before the incident, many townspeople saw biker gangs as trouble, loud, unpredictable, intimidating. But after that day, some of those assumptions faded. People began to realize that these groups often have their own codes of loyalty, justice, and protection. The biker leader's actions humanized his entire group, showing that they were not outsiders to be feared, but individuals capable of deep respect and empathy. In some cases, the biker community even became allies in the town's efforts to support victims or promote awareness. But maybe the most profound impact of all was how the story reminded the community of something they had long forgotten: their responsibility to one another. Small towns often pride themselves on closeness, yet closeness can become complacency. People assume that nothing bad happens here, or if it does, it's someone else's problem. This incident brought back the forgotten truth that everyone shares the duty to notice, to care, and to act when someone is hurting. The biker gang leader didn't just intervene for one waitress. He ignited a cultural shift. He reminded the community that silence protects abusers, that assumptions blind us, that compassion is most powerful when it walks into uncomfortable places, and that sometimes the most unexpected person can become the spark that lights a path forward for an entire town. Every story carries a message, but some stories carry a truth so powerful that it echoes far beyond the moment in which it occurs. The incident in the small town diner, the biker gang leader noticing the bruises on the waitress and stepping in, became more than a dramatic moment, more than a surprising act of kindness. It became a lesson that reached deep into the fabric of the community and far beyond it. The biggest lesson in this story is that heroism, compassion, and moral strength are not dictated by appearance, reputation, or societal expectations. They come from the choices a person makes quietly, deliberately, and often without recognition. The lesson begins with the reminder that human character cannot be judged by the surface. Society often relies on stereotypes because they make the world feel simpler and more predictable. It's easier to categorize people by their clothing, their lifestyle, their job, or the crowd they belong to. A biker gang leader, tattoos, leather, rough edges, fits the common picture of someone dangerous or rebellious. A waitress, soft, spoken, and hardworking, fits the image of someone harmless and kind. But life doesn't fit into neat categories. The person we fear can be the one who protects us. The person we overlook can be the one who suffers silently. This story forces us to confront how often we allow appearances to replace empathy. The biggest lesson here is that you never truly know someone until you witness their actions. And when the moment came that required courage, instinct, and empathy, it was the man people judged most harshly who rose to the occasion. Another profound lesson lies in understanding that kindness is universal. It doesn't belong to one group, one type of person, or one social role. The capacity to do what is right exists in people from every background, every lifestyle, and every corner of society. When the biker leader chose to intervene calmly and responsibly, he demonstrated that compassion is not softened by appearance, nor is empathy restricted by identity. Kindness is a choice, not a stereotype. Tied closely to this is the lesson that real strength is not the ability to dominate. It's the ability to protect. Strength is often mistaken for aggression, power, or the willingness to impose control. But true strength is rooted in responsibility, restraint, and the desire to keep others safe. The biker leader had the physical presence and reputation to intimidate anyone in that diner if he wanted to. But he didn't choose intimidation, he chose protection. And in doing so, he showed that the strongest people are not the ones who shout the loudest or hit the hardest. They are the ones who act with wisdom and empathy even when they are capable of doing otherwise. Another major lesson emerges. You don't need authority to make a difference. Too often, people believe they must wait for someone more qualified to step in: police, teachers, parents, leaders, professionals. They hesitate because they don't feel important enough or strong enough. But the biker leader had no official power, no badge, no authority granted by society. What he had was the willingness to step forward. His bravery teaches that ordinary people have extraordinary power when they refuse to stay silent. The story also reveals a hard truth that becomes another key lesson. Silence helps the wrong people. For weeks, months, or even longer, the waitress had gone unnoticed. Not because people were cruel, but because people were comfortable. Comfort breeds blindness. When the biker leader acted, he exposed a reality the entire town had ignored. He forced people to realize that harm often hides behind polite smiles and quiet routines. And the longer a community stays silent, the more harm is allowed to continue. His intervention teaches the importance of facing uncomfortable truths instead of pretending they don't exist. Another powerful part of the bigger lesson is that empathy begins with seeing people as human beings, not background characters. The waitress had become part of the scenery. Someone who poured coffee, wiped tables, made small talk. But nobody saw her pain because nobody truly looked. The biker leader didn't see a waitress. He saw a person who was hurting, a person who needed someone to notice. The story reminds us that everyone we meet is carrying a world of struggles, hopes, fears, and wounds we know nothing about. Seeing people fully is the first step toward helping them. There is also the lesson of unexpected leadership. Leadership isn't about titles, positions, or prestige. It's about stepping up when it matters. In that diner, the biker leader became the moral anchor everyone else needed. He set the tone, guided the moment, and took responsibility in a way no one else did. True leaders are defined by their actions, not by their status. A final crucial lesson lies in understanding that one moment can change everything. One decision, one step, one act of courage. The biker didn't plan to be a hero that day. He didn't walk into the diner expecting to influence a community or uplift someone's life. He simply chose in a single moment to do what was right. And that choice created ripples of awareness, compassion, and change far bigger than he could have imagined. The bigger lesson of this story is that heroism is not found in perfection or appearance. It is found in humanity, in the choices we make when no one expects anything from us, in the moments when we choose compassion over comfort, courage over convenience, and action over silence. In the end, what happened in that little diner became more than just a dramatic headline or a moment of unexpected bravery. It became a reminder of who we can be at our best. It showed that kindness doesn't need permission, that courage often comes from those we least expect, and that every one of us has the power to notice, to care, and to act. The biker gang leader didn't save a life because he was a hero by reputation. He became a hero because he chose to see a hurting soul and refused to look away. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson of all. The world doesn't change through grand speeches or perfect people. It changes through ordinary individuals who decide in a single moment to do the right thing. If a man judged by many and misunderstood by most can stand up for someone no one else saw, then so can we. Let this story remind us that compassion is a choice. Bravery is a responsibility. And sometimes the strongest force in the world is a heart that refuses to stay silent.